Oh, thank you. You're so kind. You're so kind. It is December, my dudes, and on this channel that means one thing and one thing only. It is Style Study Month. All through this month, we're gonna do a style study every single week because I know you guys love this series and I love it too. And it is the season of celebrating all the good things that we've done this year. And I can't give you guys a gift individually as much as I want to. So hopefully this series makes up for that. And this week, we're actually kicking off with a throwback to one of our very first style studies on this channel. Why? Because Proto on Discord asked if I would do a style restudy, and I thought, you know what, the Wang Ling style study happened so long ago, we didn't even have a style study format back then. Also, I have personally grown so much as an artist since that last video, and it is one of my highest, most viewed videos, but it's not very good compared to how good my videos are now, and I feel like you guys deserve better. So today we're taking a second look at the work of Wang Ling, also known by his online name Wlop or Wlop. And I'm gonna try my very best to not repeat all of the things that I said in the first video in case you've watched that one. Today I want to challenge us to look at some more style details that we may have missed the first time over. If this is your very first style study, please do take a moment to listen to the rest of this intro, but if you're familiar with the series already, first of all, thank you so much for coming back. I love you, and you can go ahead and skip to part 1. All the timestamps are always in the video description below. But if you're new here, hi, welcome. I am so glad you're here because today we're gonna level up our art by like 1,000,000%. Style Study is a regular series we do here on my channel where we take a look at some of our favorite contemporary artists, analyze their style, and see what we can learn from it. Keyword, learn. We're not here to plagiarize someone's work or copy anyone's style. We're only here to learn some cool art tips and techniques and see how we can apply them to finding our own original art style. I usually structure my style studies in 3 parts. In part 1, we'll take a look at Wang Ling's work, analyze his style, and see what we can learn from it. Part 2 will be a study of one of his original paintings. The reference I've chosen today is this one. Look how beautiful it is. Isn't that so pretty? Anyway, in part 3, we'll apply everything that we learned today to an original painting of our own. As always, I super appreciate a like and a subscribe if you enjoy this video, and leave a comment below telling me your biggest takeaway from this study. I love reading your comments and replying to them. And honestly, this is probably going to be a long one, so make sure you go ahead and grab a snack and a warm drink. Go do it now. Have you done it? Have you done it? Okay, good. But yeah, without much further ado, sit back and let's dive into another style study featuring Wang Ling. Wang Ling doesn't really need much introduction because pretty much every artist out there knows his work. However, I do need some place to start this video, so here we go. Wang Ling is a freelance digital artist based in Shaji, China. I hope I said that right. He actually works as a software engineer by day, and his identity is pretty much a mystery since he doesn't share any personal posts on his social media. I found an interview from 2014 where he mentioned he had been painting for about 6 years, which means he has now been painting for about 14, and honestly you can absolutely see that in his work because there is a kind of experience finesse to it that shows you that Wang Ling is an artist who knows his skill through and through. In fact, his style is so distinctive and unique, I can bet you could recognize a Wang Ling painting if it showed up on your feed. And this distinctive style and gorgeous aesthetic has garnered him over 1.4 million followers on Instagram and over 660,000 subscribers here on YouTube. In the last video, I spoke briefly about his character's compositions and colors, and today I want to dive deeper and focus on some really important details that bring his paintings to the eye-catching quality that we all know and love. Wang Ling specializes in these very soft, feminine, youthful characters, often in fantasy situations with very dynamic compositions. And like user Mighty21 mentioned in a comment, his lighting really is the magic secret sauce in his paintings. However, there are also several other details that don't hit us quite so obviously. They're rather subtle but still add to the soft, otherworldly feeling that makes his art style very etherealist. Speaking of lists, here are 5 key characteristics to Wang Ling's art. Like we spoke about earlier, the key to what makes his work super appealing is the amazing lighting. No matter what the scene may be, the lighting not only flatters the character, but also serves to draw our attention in a very specific direction. I found that there are 2 main lighting setups that span the majority of Wang Ling's work, depending on the composition. If the scene involves a character close-up on a flat or abstract background, you'll see that the lighting on their face and body is quite dramatic. There's heavy shadows, the light is super unidirectional, and there is a strong contrast between the highlight and shadow tones. Obviously, strong contrast is a relative term since Wang Ling paints skin to be relatively low contrast to begin with, but let's just say that the contrast is strongest when the character is closer up to the camera. If the character is farther away, however, you'll find that most of the drama lies in the background. And again, by drama, I mean the contrast between the lightest and darkest tones, as well as heavy shadows. And you'll see more of these 2 aspects in the background, while the character seems to be painted in relatively softer, more diffuse light. Now, why would this be? Well, think of what dramatic lighting and high contrast does in a painting. It immediately draws your attention, right? A super low contrast grey area just doesn't catch your eye so easily. So by selectively dramatizing one element in a scene, Wang Ling is essentially drawing our focus as if to say, hey look, here is the heart of this painting and everything else is built around it. When a character is close up, the character itself is the primary focus, so you'll see the dramatic lighting and shadows on their face and body, but when they're in a scene, the events occurring in the scene are the primary focus, so those are the places where the dramatic lights lie. Using selective high contrast is an excellent way to really direct the viewer's gaze without actually using direct leading lines. In the last style study about Wang Ling's art, I think I mentioned how the eyes are the biggest feature on the head and give us this baby face look. Well, looking through his work since then, I noticed that that is no longer true. The eyes are now relatively realistic in size, but another thing I noticed is that there is a lot of space between the 2 eyes. As a general rule of thumb, we space the eyes just far enough apart that you could fit a 3rd eye in between the 2. And since the eye socket is generally shadowy, it makes that distance appear even smaller. However, Wang Ling actually places the eyes more than an eye's width apart and also keeps that eye socket relatively bright. In my opinion, this adds a pretty solid amount of brightness to that inner eye socket, making the entire face feel more awake and radiant. But if the eyes aren't super big and low on the head, how does he still achieve that baby face look? Well, there are 3 other features that enhance that appearance. The first is the soft, rounded jaw, and the second is the cheekbones that are quite low on the face. Put together, these are the exact opposite of the super sculpted facial bone structure that we chase with our contouring and makeup. These softer, more rounded proportions are very reminiscent of children's fat, chubby faces, but without the extra jiggle. But the third and most subtle but most impactful feature in my opinion is the puffy under eye. You'll see that every single character has a bit of highlighted skin under the eye, which is then underlined by shadow, creating the look of the eyes being a little swollen. This is pretty common in babies because they're always crying and rubbing at their eyes, but it's also a common technique I've seen in a lot of Korean makeup tutorials for them to really highlight under the eye and then add in a shadow underneath that to make it look baggy. It really does work because you instantly see the characters as super endearing and your instinct is to want to watch them to make sure that they're safe. And that is the biggest appeal in Wang Ling's work, is that sense of endearment. Alrighty, so this is actually something I only noticed because of Med's map, so credit where credit is due, but I would say the number one skill that Wang Ling has mastered is brush economy. It is the idea of showing as much detail as possible with as few brush strokes as possible. And when you look at a Wang Ling painting as a whole, it looks super well rendered, really detailed and intricate, but it is when you zoom in that you realize, wait a minute, this is all flat brush strokes. My favorite example of this is the swans in this painting. At first glance you think, wow, they look soft and fluffy, he must have spent ages rendering the feathers. But then you zoom in and boom, it's like 8 brush strokes. Now, as someone whose default is to do the most TM, this is probably my personal Achilles heel, is to use fewer brush strokes, but I promise you this is a skill that levels up your art like no other. Why? Because it is a time saver. When we make conscious, well thought out brush strokes, it saves us from over blending, over rendering, and just over explaining our work. And as a bonus, because it saves you all that time over rendering, you now have more time to work on a grander scene. Like, look at the background details here. They are incredible and make the scene look just so vast and lifelike that you think it is all so perfectly rendered until you zoom in and notice that it is all simply indications of where the light hits. Having watched him paint before, I know that Wang Ling starts a painting in grayscale and then adds in the color. This is actually a great way to practice brush economy because it takes away color, which can often be a confusing layer to add on when you're learning a rendering skill. That, however, leads us nicely to the next point. Alright, this video is getting pretty long now, so let's take a quick puppy break. Okay, boy. Okay, you can sit there. Have you done it? Good. Now sit back and... What are you up to? What are you up to, silly boy? What are you up to? Now, the colors in Wang Ling's art are really interesting because for the most part, they appear to just be grey with little accents of saturated tones. However, if you truly try to replicate these paintings with a grey and then add in the saturated tones, you would find that the painting looks lifeless and dull. Because when you color pick the areas that appear grey, you find that they are usually a desaturated tone of blue or green or just whatever the ambient light is. Here I've grabbed a random painting from his art station and the grey bits seem to be here in the back. I'm just going to color pick, make a new layer and fill it in with the color. See how that is a lot more saturated than a grey? In fact, if I set the blend mode of this blue layer to saturation, you'll see that it doesn't immediately turn the image underneath to grayscale, it just lowers the saturation a little bit. So why does it look this grey in the painting? It is because there are some extremely saturated tones that counter this more muted blue. The red-orange of her lips, for instance, I've color picked it and filled a new layer. Do you see on the color picker how saturated this is? is. If we set this layer to saturation blend mode, this is what it looks like if everything was equally saturated. Insane, right? The point is, Wang Ling tweaks the relative saturation in order to draw focus to the central element, but also to set the mood. Because everything looks so cool toned and muted, it seems like an overcast day. If everything is warm and saturated, it looks like golden hour. But speaking of warm and cool, let's talk about the color palette. At first glance, you might think it is simple complementary colors, but having looked through the entire body of work he has online, I learned that actually it is a lot more complex because there are two main palette types across the vast majority of his work. The first is a split complementary palette. This is when you pick one color and instead of going to the exact complementary tone, you pick two colors on either side of the complementary tone. So say now our main color is an electric purple. Instead of going straight yellow, you pick an orangey tone and a green shifted yellow. That's a split complementary palette. However, sometimes when you pick the adjacent tones, it can be so far removed from the complementary tone that the three colors form almost an equilateral triangle around the color wheel. This is a triad. So, say your main color was blue. Instead of going for a straight up orange, you go either side of it, but you keep going until you reach yellow on one end and red on the other. That is a triad palette. Here is another example of a triad where if you assume green is the main color, the natural complement would be red. However, with the colors on either side shifted super far, you'll see that it goes up to orange on one end and purple-violet on the other. There's another triad. I think it takes some serious skill to use the more complex color palettes. Even if he is picking them subconsciously like many of us do, it can be so easy for it to get overwhelming, but by then also playing with saturation, Wang Ling really tells vibrant stories with tons of ambience packed in. Here's the thing about the textures. There are tons of textured brushstrokes in his work, but they are not just there to add aesthetic interest. The textures are actually a huge element of storytelling. Let's look at the hair, for instance. The hair isn't super carefully rendered, but you have a general idea of the direction due to the texture, and the hair is rather matte without too much shine. Now, here's the thing. Looking at the stray strands of hair that kind of fall out and frame the face, you'll see that their ends are often split and textured. This tells us a lot because it means that the character hasn't styled their hair, this is just their natural appearance. And that may mean that the character likes and is confident in their natural hair, or that they're in their comfort zone in this scene, or they just prefer to lead a simpler life. A great contrast is this piece. You see how here Wang Ling has painted the hair to be nice and glossy, and the stray strands look smoother and have no texture? This character has definitely made the effort to style her hair, probably because she's performing in front of a crowd. Another great texture note is in the skin. There are pretty much no hard edges in the face unless they're at the facial features. There are hue shifts and freckles, but no texture. At the most, you'll see some hard edges due to shadows, but even so, the skin is smooth. An excellent contrast to this is how Ina paints skin. She loves to paint hard edges in the skin, and when we see the two styles side by side, do you notice the completely opposite effect? Where Ina's characters look like they have dark, dramatic, violent backstories, Wang Ling's characters appear soft, youthful, and innocent. A lot of this is due to how Wang Ling paints soft, translucent, pretty much flawless skin. And finally, I just quickly want to run through the jewelry because that is like Wang Ling's trademark and is also yet another source of some really nice texture. While we know that zooming in shows us that the jewelry is usually just random brush marks, I want to look at the colors in those brush marks. Because yeah, you have the super bright highlights where the metal reflects light, but remember, shiny surfaces also reflect darker elements. So you'll see that a lot of these super bright hotspots lie right next to the super dark paint marks in the jewelry. This is what makes it look reflective. It is not that it catches some serious highlight, but that it can reflect light and dark areas right next to each other with little to no midtone in between. You learn something new every day, eh? So, to sum up part 1 of this video, here are the 5 key characteristics to Wang Ling's art. Number 1, Wang Ling uses dramatic lighting to drive attention to the point of focus without the need for clear leading lines. 2, the eyes are not the largest features on the face, but are farther apart than you would see in a realistic face. The chin is rounded, the jaw is soft, the eyes appear puffy, which causes the characters to look innocent and youthful, almost endearing. Number 3, Wang Ling uses very careful brush strokes in order to indicate background details. Remember, one solid, well-placed brush stroke works a lot better than several smaller ones. 4, most of the paintings have split complementary or triadic palettes, and he uses saturation and desaturation in order to create mood and ambience. And number 5, the textures are actually an important part of storytelling. They're not just there for aesthetic value. For our photo study today, the reference I've chosen is this painting called Shine. Well, I picked a cropped section of it because I wanted to focus on the character herself. Now, I'm painting on Critter, but I do know that Wang Ling paints on Photoshop. There is a free pack of 6 Photoshop brushes on his DeviantArt, I'll link it below, but I didn't want to spend too much time converting them for Critter, so we're gonna work with what we have, okay? Okay. The study is actually where I realized just how far apart the eyes are, because as you'll see, I did have to go back to resize and reposition them a couple of times. I started by blocking in a shadowy base to clip all of my other layers onto. Now I know this is not how Wang Ling paints, but the goal of this series is to see if we can reverse engineer the end product using only the stuff we learned by looking at his paintings plus our own painting techniques. If you want to see how I copy other people's painting techniques, I do have a completely different series called Technique Tryout, and I'll leave that in the end screen of this video. One place I definitely struggled with was the hand, probably because I placed the nose and mouth quite a ways down low on the face, and also because it's a hand. The jewelry was relatively easy to paint because it is all flat shaped. In retrospect, I'm guessing it would be easier to start by putting down the silhouette of the jewelry in a shadow tone and then painting in the light. That way you don't have to go back and paint the dark bits into the light, and add in shadows in every nook and cranny of the jewelry. That was definitely a struggle. The background was pretty nondescript, so I scribbled it in to make it vaguely similar to the reference. In the end, the study turned out relatively much higher contrast than the original, though if you've watched previous style studies, you already know that this is just my brand at this point. But here is the finished study. Let me know what you think. Fun fact, I actually painted this original piece in the first week of October when we were doing the Halloween challenge. I'm pretty damn proud of the excellent pre-planning. Should probably launch merch that is just planners. Anyway, for this painting, I wanted to try and emulate the more dramatic lighting on the close-up characters where the background is vague but identifiable. I didn't want to replicate the facial proportions perfectly, but rather wanted to focus on the lighting and textures here. I started by blocking in some super cool toned flats. These would start off as a more grey toned base and then began to throw in the warmer tones in the face. I first placed in loads of hard edges because I don't know about you, but my brain can't comprehend going straight in with the airbrush and placing soft values right from the start. We do end up blending and smoothing everything out later, don't worry. And here I put down the jewelry in a lighter color once again, and in retrospect it probably should have been a dark base and then light spots on top, but you know, you live and you learn. I did change the background several times. At first I wanted it to be a gloomy, overcast day, but she wasn't standing out against the background as vividly as I wanted her to, so I went ahead and darkened the whole entire thing. And then I hated how dark it was because I don't think I've seen Wang Ling paint something this dark, so then I brightened it up and actually really liked how she stood out against the background now. I made some more final edits, adjusting the colors, smoothing the skin out some more, you know, the usual final edits, and here is the final painting, vaguely inspired by Wang Ling. So there we have it, Wang Ling demystified again. I'm honestly shocked there was so much more to learn from his work, considering we've already done 2 other videos on him. Yeah, that's right, you forgot we've done a technique tryout on him before, hadn't you? I'll leave that link up here if you want to go watch that next. Thanks so much again to Proto for suggesting that I do a style restudy. This has been loads of fun and I hope it's been everything you've been looking for. And if the rest of you guys have enjoyed this video as well, please do remember to like and subscribe. And if there are any other artists you'd like a style study on, first check out my style study playlist. I'll leave it up here in the outro. Chances are I've probably covered some of your favorite artists on there already, but in case I haven't, feel free to leave a comment below letting me know what artists you'd like to see a style study on. Or better yet, come leave them in the Discord server like Proto did, that way your comments don't get lost in the comment section below. Come say hi on Instagram, I share all of my art as well as some mini tutorials on there. If you want to send me a DM, that's the place to be, so I'll leave a link to that in the description below as well. But that's about all I have to say today, so thank you guys so much for hanging out with me today. I know it was a long one, but I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. Check out some more style studies up here. Happy Style Study Month, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye!